So I want to first start with the Hall of Fame because, you look at guys like Piazza and Griffey, and I know we use this description very often, but, the fact that, we'll never see a player like them again, but I genuinely feel like we will never see players like Griffey and Piazza again, because these guys were more than just power hitters. These were more than just guys who hit for average. These are guys that were superstars in their sport and for their teams.
Yeah, I mean, Piazza talking about the greatest hitting catcher, of all time, probably power hitting catcher. And Griffey kind of transcend the sport, just make him, the game fun again, almost like what Bryce Harper is doing now, and Mike Trout, with the backwards hat, and just had so much fun with the smile. So I'm not sure he'll ever be another Ken Griffey Jr. and what he's meant to the sport.
Looking back at their careers, Bob, Griffey, if it wasn't for the injuries, a lot of people feel like he would have been the one who could have broken Hank Aaron's record. I mean, he did still finish with over 600 home runs. But I think that kind of belittles his career a little bit because he still had an amazing career. I mean, hitting 630 home runs and having a career batting average of 284 is no joke, right?
No, just a natural hitter. And just a fabulous player. I hate to just say hitter because he was such a great outfielder as well. Tremendous arm, tremendous speed, everything.
Also, flipping over to Mike Piazza, this is a guy who, toward the end of his career, he was a little bit less effective, just because of age and various things. But, this is a guy who, you wrote about this. He was kind of unexpected. You wrote about this, saying how, wasn't expected. He was drafted so late in the draft, he was basically an afterthought.
Yeah, he was only drafted as a favorite at Tom Lasorda. He wasn't interested, nobody was interested in him. I mean, he was a 1,370-some guys were picked before him. So complete afterthought and just a guy that many didn't think he could play. And if not for Tom Lasorda, he's probably working with his dad, running car dealerships and doing stuff like that in Pennsylvania. It's amazing what he did.
We're talking with Bob Nightengale. You can follow him on Twitter at @BNightengale. He writes for USA Today. Looking at the Hall of Fame, a lot of guys make it in, don't make it in every year. It's a big conversational topic. And I want to ask you, we've gone through a long time of different guys making it and not making it. Jim Rice had to wait till the end, whereas, guys like Nolan Ryan got to go in, basically immediately. So I want to ask you, do you think we'll ever get to a point with the voting for the Hall of Fame that there's a little bit more consistency or pattern, or do you think every year is always going to be a challenge?
Well, I think the fact that Mike Piazza's in now, and there was a whole lot of steroid suspicions, surrounding him more than anybody has played the game. And I think because of that, now I think the door will open for a Jeff Bagwell, a Barry Bonds, a Roger Clemens. So I'll be interested to see how much of a spike there is in the vote total a year from now.
You mentioned a couple of those guys. Another guy who I would throw out there is Jeff Kent, right?
Yeah, but Kent wasn't, really wasn't steroid suspicions involving Kent. He's a guy, I think, just because the ballot has been so crowded, he hasn't been able to get in. I think he will, great offensive second baseman. And so I believe he does get in, but it's going to probably take a couple more years.
Let's transition over to the MLB Trade Deadline in our area. We live in an area where there's a lot of Phillies fans and Mets fans and Yankee fans. So you have three teams right there all going in very different directions with their franchise. Let's first start with the Phillies. There's a lot of names being thrown around, whether it's Peter Borges, Jeremy Hellickson, Carlos Ruiz. From your perspective, who do you think is actually going to be moved from the Phillies?
I think Hellickson will be. If somebody wants those other guys, fine, but there's not a lot of value there. They would have traded Ruiz, a long time ago if they had a chance. Obviously, Ward just great defensive center fielder, but they could have had this guy too. So I think the guy with the value is Hellickson, and he probably would have been moved already if he hadn't been hurt before.
Also looking at the Phillies, Ryan Howard is in the final year of his contract. I want to ask you, because I heard someone say this earlier today, and this is the conversation we got into earlier this week, looking back at all the first baseman contracts that were signed over the last several years, whether it was Howard, Fielder, Pujols, Teixeira, the list keeps going on and on. I want to ask you, was Ryan Howard overpaid at the time?
Well, he was playing so well, hitting all those home runs. Who knew he was going to rupture that Achilles? He wasn't the same after that. So it's not like he just hit a wall or wasn't working hard. This is a guy that just could never recover from that. And that's a shame. Who knows what kind of career he would have had if not for that, final game in 2011, the playoffs, when blew out that Achilles run to first base in the last play of the day.
Transitioning over to the New York Yankees, this is a team that's in flux. There are reports out that Brian Cashman wants to start the rebuild, whereas Randy Levine and Hal Steinbrenner don't want to. And then John Heyman comes out with a report today saying that the Blue Jays are looking at CC Sabathia. So I ask you, do you think by the time August 1st comes around, the Yankees will be buyers or sellers?
I think they'll be modest sellers. It depends what they do in this next 10 days. I think Chapman's gone for sure. He's a free agent. So they're going to get a whole lot more for him than gave up. I have a hard time believing the CC Sabathia thing. Just has a huge contract for next year. That's not Mark Shapiro's deal. So that was hard to believe unless they're just paying a ton of the contract, which I don't see them doing. Then we'll see about Beltran. Beltran's a free agent too. I think Andrew Miller will stay unless someone just completely blows him away.
And then flipping over to the Mets, this is a team that's also in flux, but for a totally different reason. They've had injuries to Harvey. You got guys like Syndergaard with issues with his elbow, and then they bring in Jose Reyes to play, play third base. So where do you think the Mets are going to go? Because a lot of people believe that, they may go after pitching. We've had Steve Gardner on the air here on 97.3 ESPN, and he talked about that they really need pitching. So do you think pitching is going to be something the Mets will go after at the deadline?
Well, they would like to get, some. I think they need a bat more than that. But, with Colon struggling like he has, they can use a starter. Let's face it, it's a very weak starting market. It's not like a year ago. There's no Cole Hamels out there or David Price or John Aguero. So, could get someone like a Hellickson. I don't think it'd be big. I don't think they're really going to go into that big a landscape.
Speaking of the pitching landscape, I wanted to ask you about the Red Sox acquiring Drew Pomeranz. They gave up a big-time prospect in Espinosa. Do you think that they overpaid for Pomeranz?
The big Pomeranz is you get him for 2 years after that. The downside is this guy's never put together, one good complete season, and he's going from the NL West, the easiest division in baseball to pitch in, to the AL East, probably the hardest division to pitch in. So it remains to be seen how he'll do. Obviously, he's not going to put the same kind of numbers in San Diego as he would, in Boston. It's just so different. We saw years ago, Jake Peavy get pounded in Boston. He goes to San Francisco in that ballpark and pitches like Cy Young. It's just apples and oranges with the two leagues.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you one more question about the MLB Trade Deadline. Is there a guy or guys out there that may or may not be rumored too much that you look at and say, that guy is probably going to get moved no matter what by the trade deadline?
I would say no matter what. I'm kind of getting the sense, because the starting market is so weak, why not listen on Quintana for the White Sox? I think they'll listen to him, and he'd be by far the best guy out there, and you get him past this year to cheap contract. That's a guy that can surprise everybody. I don't believe Chris Hill in a heartbeat. It's very too valuable. And I don't believe Chris Archer either. I just think Archer means way too much to that organization, in that franchise and community, to be trading him.
Yeah, real quick about Chris Archer. I don't understand that. Some of these trade rumors about him, and yet he arguably is that franchise outside of Longoria. So why would you ever consider trading him?
I don't think you can. I think they throw him out there and say, well, someone knock their socks off. But, he's a huge ambassador for that team. Means so much to that city. I can't see it without, I'm not saying they have a big fan base, but I think if they trade Chris Archer, they'd have a zero fan base.
You can follow him on Twitter at @Nightengale. He writes for USA Today. He's a contributor to MLB Network. Bob Nightengale, appreciate you joining me on the Sports Bash today.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you.